Welcome to Trulyfit.
Allison, thank you so much for joining the Trulyfit Podcast for the second time around. For those who have not heard you the first time around, why don't you give a quick description of who you are, your bona fides, so to speak, what you do in the fitness and health industry on a day-to-day basis.
Happy to. Thanks for having me back. So I ran a brand for about 10 years called Allison Jackson Fitness, which still is alive and kicking. I have my own podcast called Fit to Lead. But I've kind of gone through an evolution from competitive bodybuilder to yoga instructor to sound healer. And now I'm really focused on kind of holistic wellness, really looking at corporate and how people get really burnt out, looking at the mental aspect as well as the physical aspect. I feel like that's something that kind of gets lost in translation as you're, competing in bodybuilding and really focused on getting into shape. So super excited to be here and chat more.
Do you do any sort of like corporate wellness where you're working with large groups of people at one time as opposed to individuals who work in corporations?
Yeah, so a lot of what I'm doing now is a lot of lunch and learn events. So kind of taking big audiences and talking them through what are the key components of wellness, everything from sleep to hydration to mental health and physical health.
Yeah, you wonder if there's going to come a time where these big companies, let's just say like a Johnson & Johnson or somebody, is going to have somebody on staff who's doing all of that, right? Some sort of not a physician, not just a personal trainer, but a health and wellness advisor, somebody who can do the small things like talk to people one-on-one and make sure they go over maybe their diet plans and their other plans, but also give them stretches or work with them or massage therapy, just sort of like a wellness clinic inside of these bigger organizations.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. And I think a few of them, there's a couple here and there that are doing it and did it well before the pandemic. We're kind of ahead of their time. But I would love to see more companies do that because I think there's such a benefit there.
I trained a lawyer once who, he was retired when I was training him, but at the time that he was in practice with 5 other lawyers. This was somewhere in the Boston area. And they had exactly what I was talking about. They had a personal trainer with a lot of different certifications, and there was a lot of travel that they had to do. And if more than one of them was traveling for a big case for a long time, they would actually pay to bring said trainer with them so that they had him at the location so that they stayed in shape. I thought that was really cool that one guy was just training these 5 or 6 lawyers and was able to fly around the country doing it. I was like, that's the job that I want.
Yeah, that is a sweet gig right there.
So today, I think we're going to focus the conversation around perimenopause and menopause. Let's give maybe 2 definitions here. Let's give that sort of high level, easy definition for those who don't know what it is. And then if you want to break down a more scientific definition, feel free to throw some jargon at us here.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do that. So I have to start off by saying I thought perimenopause and menopause, I thought it was like diabetes. I only thought certain people got it. I thought it was it wasn't something everybody went through. So, those health classes we attended during puberty, they don't cover perimenopause and menopause. And essentially what it is as women age, personally, I think there is a version of menopause, but as women age, our hormones change. So, when we're younger, our hormones are geared to have babies, right? That's what kind of our bodies are geared to do. And when you hit a certain age, just, you kind of, your hormones change. They start to shift. So perimenopause is the beginning of the shift. It ranges, right? Some people start at 35, some start at 45, some never go through it, some go right into menopause. And so in the terms like tell it to me like a 5, it's the change of hormones. It's your hormones are shifting and changing. The scientific term, it's let me think. I'm trying to think. I don't want to get like too sciencey with it, but essentially, menopause, the definition is you've stopped having your cycle for at least a year. Perimenopause is your body, you start, you stop, you start, you stop. You're having all kinds of crazy symptoms like hot flashes, muscle aches, sleeplessness, anger. The symptoms are wide ranging, and it's funny because something will happen, like my joints really hurt, and I thought I was having like a medical issue, and I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure that's like if there's a weird symptom you have, chances are it's probably part of perimenopause.
So you name some of the signs and starting symptoms. I guess like you can feel those, but maybe from the outside, let's say your husband or your trainer, like how does somebody else potentially see that you're going through either perimenopause or you're already into menopause?
Yeah. So I think for trainers and for my husband, there's symptoms that are I'm going to use air quotes, but call them typical, right? So it's hot flashes, it's irritability, it's night sweats, it's your hair is falling out, your skin is super dry, you have no libido. But what I would say for trainers, which I know a lot of them may or may not do, is to have your clients get their blood work done and make sure you have an understanding of where their hormones are at any given time. And this is good for men or women, understanding how much estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, where the levels are. Because when they're starting to get all cockeyed or they're off kilter, that is typically a sign that there's something at play there around perimenopause and menopause.
Are there expected, I would say, major deviations in experiences? Does Allison have a much different experience during her perimenopause leading into menopause than, let's say, Susie, who then has a different experience than Sally?
Yeah, I would say definitely. I would say look at your mother, your grandmother, what they went through, because typically that is what you will go through. However, my mom had horrible symptoms. I think being a bodybuilder and skewing a little bit healthier, exercise-wise, diet-wise, I don't feel like my symptoms are as bad. Some days are worse than others. But for me, it was a combination of, like I mentioned, the hot flashes and night sweats. But what surprised me most of all as a trainer and a bodybuilder was the joint pain in trying to lift. So what I've tried to do to counteract that is I've been following some trainers that really are women in their 40s, 50s, focused on higher reps, 3 sets of higher reps with lower weights. It's just being able to hold those weights, like your wrists, your elbows. They just hurt. They ache. It's like I don't know how else to explain it. So that for me has been the biggest hurdle to overcome when it comes to perimenopause.
How do these anti-aging medicine clinics work with women? I know how they work with men, right? You just said menopause. When men, it's a whole nother rabbit hole to dive down because men are on it. It's in my opinion sometimes too early, and then there's the psychological side that's not talked about because you have these men who go on it who change personality wise, right? And maybe their wife isn't ready for that or their kids and things of that nature. So there's a whole thing, but how does it work from the female side? Is it actually raising like endogenous hormones? Are you getting exogenous hormones? Is it something in between? How does that work?
Yeah, so I would say it varies, right? I know a lot of women are afraid of HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy. I personally have gone down the path of, I had a Dutch test done, which is a dried urine test that looks at your different, where you are, throughout your entire cycle. And from that, I worked with a functional dietitian to take like supplements and like licorice root and ashwagandha and different things that are natural. That's the path I've chosen. I use a topical progesterone. But I feel like you should look at all your options. You should look at what your symptoms are, what you feel comfortable with, and just take in as much information as you can and talk to people, talk to different doctors. It doesn't always have to be hormone replacement, but sometimes that works for people and does wonders for them.
All right, let's put your personal trainer hat on now. You are a personal trainer. You're working with somebody who you believe is in the throes of perimenopause leading into menopause. We'll go through it, the differences between maybe a male and a female. How do you potentially broach that conversation with your client if maybe they have not brought it up?
Yeah, I would look at, obviously age plays a huge role, but I would ask them if they have any, uncommon or irregular symptoms that, how do they sleep? How's their water intake? How is their skin? And, look at the typical symptoms that you see in perimenopause and menopause. Ask your client, are they going through any of those? Any irregular joint pain, irritability, libido, all those things. I think it's important to know where your clients are because that is going to impact what their workouts are like. They might not be able to go as heavy or as long as, a younger client.
Yeah, I think to maybe putting it on the health history form that your client gets right away, whether it's, hey, are you currently going through these? Have you had any of these symptoms? Or even saying something to the extent of, if and when you do go through these, do you feel comfortable, relaying that back to me? Because it is obviously an important part, like you said, of changing the training if and when they go through that. Can you talk about what other training you mentioned earlier? You might have had some elbow or joint related pain. Can you think of anything else from a training perspective that you might switch up when somebody is now going through this?
Yeah, so I think women, as we get older, right, we're still kind of stuck in that younger mindset, and men too, right, that you have to push hard, high intensity cardio, long workouts. What happens with women is their cortisol levels just sometimes are burnt out from working out that way when they're younger. So part of the perimenopause, menopause thing is bringing the cortisol levels down. That means low intensity, lower workouts, long walks, hiking, yoga. You don't have to do Orange Theory. You don't have to do CrossFit workouts and raise your heart rate to a crazy level. I typically will tell people like who ask me like, what do you do? I try to get 10 to 12,000 steps a day. I play pickleball twice a week. I do yoga. I go hiking. I try to just hit that step number versus actually having to do 1 hour workout at the gym, cardio wise. So that would be the other thing that I think is a big misconception is around kind of pushing yourself really hard. We're at a different stage of life now, especially when you're not sleeping as well, that recovery and low impact workouts are super important.
All right. This question might be the hardest of all. I don't think we planned for this at all, but why is it, why do you believe that women are, as you just mentioned, sometimes these like cortisol junkies, right? I always thought in my head, the reason why the Orange Theory classes are filled with more women is because they just like to be under direction. But now I know that's really not the case. It's a certain type of exercise that they gravitate towards. Why is that? And how do we potentially talk people out of that as personal trainers talking to our clients?
Yeah, I think it's that culture and mentality that we've grown up with for years of no pain, no gain. You got to burn calories. You got to eat less. You got to work out more. You got to work out harder. You got to sweat. It has to be at least an hour workout. I feel like that is so ingrained in people's minds that you can't break free from it. I mean, I went through the same thing. I was like, well, I'm not sweating. That means I'm not working out, or I'm not, it's not an hour long. It doesn't count. It's not at a gym. All of those things you need to just kind of let them go and really and this is for anybody, any age, right? Tune into your body. Like if something hurts, don't do it. Like don't go there. Sometimes you need a break. Like rest and recovery are as important as the lifting and the workouts. That is when the magic happens, right? You know that, Steve. Like that is when your muscle is being built, is when you are resting and feeding it and recovering.
Yeah, it needs to be more of an art than a science, more right brain than left brain sometimes. I try to convey that to my clients. Don't always have a plan, a structured plan. Go into the gym, warm up, see how your body feels, and then make a plan from there. Some days you're going to go light, some days you're going to go heavy. Just understand that you can't just write something out and follow it to a T. This isn't like a budget. It's a little bit different. Your body has too many variables and you're going to have to take some days off.
Yes, I love that.
Let's talk about the emotional side. I imagine whether it's mechanistically things that are going on, the hormones we just talked about, or otherwise psychologically, that there is a lot of changes all at once, which can then in turn mess with you mentally. What are the mental symptoms that me as a personal trainer need to worry about with my clients, and for us to just recognize and be more empathetic with our clients who are going through this?
Yeah, I would say you're definitely going to have to be a little bit part therapist, right? Because I feel like when women hit a certain age, they still think they're in their 20s or 30s, and body image wise, it's hard to come to terms with, your body isn't what it used to be. I know a lot of women talk about the middle age pouch or the menopause pouch. It's helping them understand that their 40 or 50-year-old self is not their 20 or 30-year-old self. And that's okay. Like that's part of aging. But we also need to be training for who we're going to be in our 70s and 80s, right? We want to be able to lift our grandkids and be mobile and injury free. It's less about how you look in a bikini on the beach and more about longevity and feeling good versus looking good.
Yeah. And I think we need to ingrain that into our clients well before they get to that stage, because what happens is by the time they get to that stage, sometimes there's too many injuries, so they're too immobile, or like we just talked about, the bad habits have been ingrained into them to think you need to burn as many calories as you can. So I think although we always say, okay, it's okay to train for vanity when you're younger, as you get older, you have to change. I do think it's almost at some point that needs to change even earlier. Like forget about menopause, like even in your 30s, we need to say, you know what, it's time to understand that, like you just mentioned, there is going to be a time down the road. It might not be right now, but 20 years from now, you're going to want to get up and off the floor and play with your grandkids. Maybe doing, a set of 4 of the heaviest deadlift you possibly can 3 times a week is not the best for what you're ultimately going to do. And that's different when you're training like you used to get on stage. It's a short period of time where you have a goal. But I think that there is this sort of still like high school football mentality lifting that both guys and girls are doing into late age, where that needs to kind of change. Don't worry about the numbers. Don't worry about just getting the higher number for the lower rep. I mean, we have to understand that this is a long-term game.
Yes. And break up with the numbers. Like I still struggle. I'm trying to break up with my scale. Like we get that number stuck in our head. Like I need to be this number. And instead it's like, do you like the way you look in the mirror? Do you like the way your clothes fit? Like worry more about that than the number on the scale, because you're the only one who knows what that number is. And I know I struggle with it. I know others, I'm sure trainers struggle with it with their clients all the time. If people have to lose, are trying to lose weight, it's one thing, but if you're just maintaining and you're just working out for your health, we need to let go of the scale.
Yeah. Easier said than done. And I think one of the reasons why is someone like you, it actually might be easier because you're so knowledgeable. You can look at other metrics. You might know, okay, I can measure my hips and arms and waist. I can look at heart rate variability. I can look at, body fat percentage, all these things. But for the average person who doesn't have this sort of knowledge, it's the only number they have, right? All they know is I step on the scale, it tells me a number. So that's why I try to educate my clients on, okay, there's a lot of other metrics that we can look at here. And there's people who want to measure weekly. I tell them, no, I will never measure weekly. We can do maybe bi-weekly at the most. But ultimately, if you have 8 or 9 numbers that you're measuring, there's always going to be a few that are good. You just focus on those, right? You're like, okay, well, this number isn't what you want it to be, but this number and this number is good. So we're okay. But if you have that one number, you're flipping a coin here. You have a 50% chance that your client is going to be very upset.
Yes, I would agree with that. I love that.
Although I hate the term misinformation because that changes from time to time. What can be perceived as misinformation one day could be the correct information the next day. What do you believe are any one thing or multiple things that are passed around talking about this subject that are misguided, let's say?
Yeah. So for a long time, I was not anti, but like intermittent fasting. I was like, that's another fad, or keto. And my feeling is different things work for different people, right? So like now intermittent fasting, I'm using it. I feel like it works well for me at this point in my life. But like diets like keto or diets where you're eliminating entire food groups, those for me, that's a deal breaker. If you can't put your toddler on it, you shouldn't be on it. Everything should be, well balanced, eating whole foods, minimizing the processed foods. But what I would say in terms of misinformation, everyone nowadays wants that quick fix, right? I want it right away. We're the Ozempic generation. It's like, if it sounds too good to be true, most likely it is. And I'm not knocking anybody on Ozempic. A lot of my friends are on it and they don't want to tell me about it. I'm like, if that works for you, that is fine. That's not what I choose to do. But that's what I would say. Do your homework. Like if it sounds too good to be true, it may be. But everybody reacts to different things differently. So I would say, try it. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, then that's not for you.
I know in the social media world, we all have our own algorithm. I don't see what you see, what, Sally and Sandy see. We all see different things. I imagine there are, though, particular diets that women or men, whoever deals with this subject, talk about. What are they? Do they say, hey, if you want to get over menopause symptoms, you should only eat carnivore, you should only eat keto? Is that what people are saying?
Yes, I see a lot of carnivore. I see a lot of Whole30, keto, pick a diet. And it's like, oh, that's the cure-all for menopause. And it's like, no. What I found helped me, because I wasn't really eating it when I was competing, whole grains. And when I say whole grains, I don't mean like brown rice and oatmeal. Whole grains like bulgur, millet, like really like grains that you really have to go out of your way to get. It's made a huge difference in my gut health, which is another piece of the puzzle. Not only for perimenopause and menopause, but just overall health, right? There's like a whole Netflix special on gut health. So that's what I would say. Yeah, pick a diet. That's the one that they're slapping on as the cure-all.
Is there a time in which, forgive my naivety here, where the symptoms are supposed to dissipate? Meaning like, okay, you're going through this hormonal change. I'm just making up a number from 48 to 51. And then like, okay, now everything is leveled out. So I should hypothetically feel better. And if not, then maybe there's a bigger issue and I need to go see a specialist.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to just use typical numbers because obviously I'm not a doctor and everybody's different. So perimenopause is typically like 40 to 55. Obviously, it could vary. It could be 35 to 50, regardless. It takes like, and it could be 2 years, it could be 5 years, it could be 7 years. Some people don't go through it at all. But perimenopause is as you're moving into like everything is changing. The hormones are shifting. Your cycles are getting irregular. And then you hit menopause. Menopause is you haven't had your cycle in a full year. At that point, your hormones should be leveling out. I mean, like your cycle's gone. That's what really kind of gets things, your hormones are up, down, up, down. And then they should level out. If they're not leveling out, and that could be, again, could be 55, could be 65, could be 70. That is when you should look for help regardless. Like if your symptoms are horrible, obviously seek a doctor's assistance. But once you hit menopause, after a certain time, it should all level out and you should not have the symptoms.
What was your first change, not physiologically, but in your programming that you did when you knew you had this? When you came to the realization, you said, okay, was there any one particular thing you said, I'm absolutely going to stop doing this, or I'm absolutely need to add this into my programming, being that you're a personal trainer and you understand the intricacies?
Yeah, it goes back to the conversation we had about cortisol. I immediately stopped I was doing Orange Theory. I was doing all kinds of crazy, like intense workouts. And when I realized like my cortisol levels were crazy and I was just like that, my body was like burnt out from that. That's when I backed off and just found other ways to keep movement in. But I stopped with the high intensity workouts.
Do you personally use any like watch or Oura Ring metrics to look over any heart rate variability numbers or anything associated with that? The reason I ask that is because I wonder if those things work in conjunction with the hormone changes when one goes through during perimenopause and menopause.
Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of Fitbit. I'm on like my 5th Fitbit and I subscribe to like the full like health diagnostic. So I do look at things like recovery. What does my recovery look like each day? My sleep patterns, my HRV. If you have alcohol or you're getting ready to get your period, your HRV will or getting ready to get sick, your HRV will drop significantly. So tracking all that and making sure that your workouts and what you do the next day take that into account. I'm a huge proponent of that. And I'm a data junkie. So I love like that kind of feedback. I even did the glucose monitoring for like a month or two just to see. I was so interested. So my dad's diabetic. And I got him to use it now because he used to do like the finger prick thing. I tried the glucose monitor and it's amazing. Like if you really want to see the impact of food to your blood and mood and feel, highly recommend. Have you tried that before?
I haven't. So the only reason why is because my sister talked me out of it. I'm going to do it. She's like a registered dietitian, a nutritionist, and she basically thinks that these things should be reserved for people who like absolutely need them. To each their own. I don't necessarily think that. I think it's good to know your body, and it's just one more number to add on. So at some point, I do think I will do it. I also I have a 9-week-old, so my life has been sort of lack of sleep. Yeah, surrounded by that. So this isn't the right time to take all the appropriate metrics. As I'm eating whatever's around the house at any given time when I'm awake. So, but I will. How did you find that experience? Was it costly? Did somebody approve it through insurance means? How does that work?
Yeah, so I did it. It was, I had actually talked to somebody on my podcast who was like part of that company. And they're like, oh, do you want to do like a test? Like I did like a 2-month test. I knew it was something I wasn't going to do long term. I just wanted to kind of have the experience and see like what the feedback was. So it was not that expensive. I think all in it was maybe $120. I did it for 2 months. And I tried to do it in a way that I didn't change my diet significantly. I wanted to see how I was eating and how it impacted my blood sugar. And it was fascinating, especially seeing the impact of like exercise, of like drinking. It was like a nice learning experience. I think you would probably feel the same way.
Yeah. That was the first thing I thought of. I was just going to ask you that. Was there a major difference during and pre and post exercise periods, as opposed to not exercising? Because I think that a lot of people are using it, are only using it and looking at the food coming in, rather than sort of the grander picture of all the other things that could affect it.
Yeah, it actually spikes, your blood sugar spikes after you work out, which I was like, that's fascinating. I did not realize that. And then the other thing too is I was following the Glucose Goddess, and she has all these different tips around like eat your veggies and protein first before you eat your carbs because it'll blunt your blood sugar. So I was like testing that kind of stuff too, which was really interesting because it does.
Yeah. Well, I also wonder how much, I would imagine most of this stuff tracks across population, but there's got to be some things that do work for Allison that don't work for Steve also, right? And that's why you go do these tests, right? So maybe I do the same thing that you just did that the Glucose Goddess said. And for some reason, it doesn't work for me, whether it's like a gut bacteria, an enzyme related issue or whatnot. So it is interesting. And I think I'm going to add that to the list. It also makes for a good podcast, right? You do it, you get all the information and you get to, read that information out afterwards.
Yeah, for sure.
So you mentioned earlier some supplements. I imagine there's also some snake oil in the industry. Is there anything that people say that works that you think doesn't work? Is there anything that you believe, obviously you're not giving a recommendation as a physician but something that you believe that is not harmful, just a regular vitamin that you would take and you would even tell your clients who are going through this that is probably beneficial for them.
Yeah. So I think I mentioned I take like a liquid form of licorice root. And it's funny because I got a colonoscopy, so I had to stop all my supplements. And when you don't think they're working, stop taking them. And then you realize how bad your symptoms are. And you're like, oh, this is helpful. So licorice root was one. I'm taking, it's like a perimenopause combo of like chasteberry, ashwagandha, and elderberry. So it's just like, again, all natural supplements. And I'm a huge proponent of creatine and collagen. Perimenopause, menopause or not, I do a shake every day of that, and then a multivitamin, fish oil, a probiotic. That's just the stuff that I take that I found is helpful to me.
Sort of rewind and talk about what you're currently doing in health and fitness. Are you only now exclusively trying to work with people who are in, again, the burnout corporate phase? Do you work with women who have menopause? Are you open to working with everybody? Do you do only virtual, in person? Give me the whole picture here.
I selectively work with like perimenopause, menopause women and more in like a consultative way. I don't do any more online fitness and nutrition coaching, unfortunately. I am focused on corporate and really kind of bringing the message to them around how to prevent burnout, getting people on board with wellness. I'm virtual, but I love doing speaking engagements. Like I'm trying to really kind of spread the word in that way at conferences and events, both to companies and just to, busy working women. I feel like a lot of the women in corporate at the executive level, they're the ones that are hitting this point in their lives now. And their nutrition and workouts really need to kind of be in lockstep with where they are at this point in their life.
Well, I have another question off of that because I've had trainers reach out to me and ask me, how do you start speaking at places? Like, how do you get into conferences? How do you get into these like corporate gigs? And I have no answers for them. I've honestly never done it before. So what are you just cold calling, cold reaching out to people? Did you hire some sort of like PR or publicist team to help you? What is the process of doing that?
Yeah, so I'd say it's a combination. So my background is corporate communication, so I have a great network of people that are at companies. But then I also just apply for, there's always an open call for speakers. If you go to Google, type in like use quotes and type in your topic. Maybe it's like, personal training conferences. Do a Google search, see what comes up. There typically is a call for speakers. Some of them are paid, some of them are not. It's a great way to get exposure. I would also talk at your local library, your local chamber of commerce. This is how I got my start. In 2020, I did 20 talks and they were just free and they were anywhere and everywhere I could get them. Reach out to local companies, their HR. People are always looking for lunch and learn speakers. It's a great way to get your foot in the door. If you give a free talk and then say, hey, I have a 6-week group coaching session or package that I could offer your company if you want me to come in every week. There's a lot of opportunity out there. You just gotta dig for it.
Yeah, I think when people ask that question, they don't want that answer, and that is the perfect answer. They want the easy answer. They're like, oh no, you just go to this website and you type in your name and you get 100 calls and they're going to pay you a lot of money to speak. It's like, no, first you have to get good at speaking, so you're going to have to do it for free and often. And then you're going to have to pitch yourself. You're going to have to go to these, whatever it is. If there's a conference, a fitness conference in Atlanta, you're going to have to pitch yourself and tell them, okay, I've had 20 speaking engagements before. This is what I typically speak about. Here's a review from the whatever, all the people who were there. I mean, obviously, it's like anything else. You're applying for a job in a sense.
You got to put in the reps. It's a numbers game. So you could apply for 100 speaking gigs and you'll be lucky to get 1 or 2. I know nobody wants to hear that, but I'm going to be honest.
Well, that's maybe the overall theme for this conversation in general. People don't want to hear the hard answers. They want the easy way out. There is no easy way out. You have to do the hard work here.
Yes.
Okay, Allison, why don't you let my listeners know exactly where they can find you, your website, or the easiest email?
Yeah, www.allisonjacksonfitness.com or hello@allisonjacksonfitness.com. You can also find me. I'm all over LinkedIn. So just do a search for Allison Jackson Fitness and you'll find me. That's usually where I hang out.
I will put the links in the podcast description. My guest today has been Allison Jackson. Thank you for joining the Trulyfit Podcast.
Thank you.